Hi everyone, I'm Dan, SEEP's Director of Communications, and today I'll be guiding you through best practices in voter engagement training. Before we get started, here are a few things we hope you will take away from this training. Each of our trainings comes with a few learning outcomes to give you an idea if it will be helpful for you. By the end of this training, you will have learned about different ways to engage your peers and choose the ways which best suit your campus. Gain the skills necessary to be able to navigate conversations with your peers while staying nonpartisan, and how to assist students with absentee and early voting. The first topic we're going to cover today is voter registration. This includes any effort intended to register students to vote. Since registration rules and procedures vary by state, we recommend that you research your state laws and reach out to your state director and Secretary of State's office with questions. Here's some of the questions you might have to answer during a voter registration activity. Who can legally be registered to vote? Does your state offer online voter registration? If so, what does the process look like? When is the deadline for in-person registration? What, if any, identification do you need to take to the polls? Does a campus ID card meet state law criteria? Keep in mind the fact that college students can register to vote at their home or college address, and you should be ready to talk through these options with each student. If you aren't familiar with the answers to all of these questions, talk to your state director. Voter registration events can take a variety of forms. You can use tabling, dorm storms, posters and bulletin boards, registration at orientation, candidate forums, social media campaigns, virtual voter summits, question and answer sessions, text and email chains, social media, and much more to register students to vote. Feel free to brainstorm and come up with even more creative ideas. With our new virtual options, a whole new world of virtual voter engagement is at your disposal. Get creative and find ways to engage your campus off and online. Each campus and state is different, so please plan activities that fit your campus's policies, procedures, and culture. If you have trouble coming up with event ideas, check out our virtual event suggestions in the Fellows Drive. You can also ask your state director what other fellows have done in the past, and SEEP will provide opportunities for you to connect with other students and exchange ideas. We recommend that you take advantage of the many online tools available to help students register to vote. Campuses and students across the country are turning to virtual tools in light of the pandemic, so please do explore your virtual options. Use tablets, laptops, and phones to share links to the SEEP website and to your state Secretary of State website. Look into other tools such as vote.org as well. We will be tracking a majority of our voter registration through online platforms and QR codes. So it is important that you understand the tools at your disposal. If you have any questions about SEEP-specific links for voter registration, please ask your state director. To host successful voter registration drives, we recommend that you plan activities around holidays and other special occasions. For example, National Voter Registration Day is a great time to get students excited about registering to vote. We've also had fellows create activities around holidays like Halloween and Valentine's Day. When planning activities, it's important to pick times and locations that are easy for lots of students to attend. Start advertising early so that as many people as possible know about the activity. And connect with campus administration, student government, and other organizations to increase reach. As always, be creative. The more interactive the event, the more students will be engaged. Try holding some virtual events like going into online classrooms to talk to students about voting, or create a virtual poster party to build excitement for a voting-related holiday. Voter education cahoots are a great way to engage students in a fun way, especially if there's a prize at the end. Just like building your team, it's important to create some on-campus partnerships early on in your activity planning. Reach out to people who share the goal of increasing student voter turnout. If you're not sure who to reach out to, talk to your campus advisor and state director for advice on where to start. They might know some great connections who can help you plan your activities and engage your campus. Next is voter education. These activities include any effort to educate students on the electoral process. You can talk to students about issues and candidates, why elections matter, the history of voting rights and youth participation, or provide them with Election Day information. There are lots of different strategies when it comes to voter education. But first and foremost, it's important that you and any volunteers assisting you are well educated on voting. Voter education activities are supposed to bring clarity, not confusion. So make sure to do plenty of research before getting started and host thorough training for volunteers. SEEP has lots of resources available to you, either to learn about voter engagement yourself so that you can educate others, or for you to distribute to others. You can find these resources on the Fellows Drive or on our website. You can also ask your state director for more specific resources. If you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to recommend some resources that you'd like to see. The best voter education activities are the most creative ones. Make sure you facilitate conversations and activities that include lots of students. Consider hosting voter education seminars in classrooms, or town halls, voter summits, and debate watch parties. Many of these activities can be converted to a digital setting, but if they're not quite right for your campus, you can also consider posting announcements through your school's messaging system or by leading online trivia games. There are many resources available at SEEP and elsewhere to help people have civil dialogue, or to facilitate educational events around voting and candidates and their stances on issues. It can be tricky to do this in a nonpartisan manner, but it's possible. Check out Living Room Conversations for information on leading discussions. You may also be interested in utilizing resources from the League of Women Voters, Nonprofit Vote, and Project Vote Smart. For a fun voter education event, try making a Kahoot or a trivia event. If you don't find anything you like, you can also ask your state director for any SEEP-specific resources we might have. Here's a few voter education tips and tricks as you start planning and holding your events. Before starting a voter education event, make sure that you and your volunteers have a firm grasp on all of the information you're presenting and discussing. Also, prepare resources so that students have access to correct information. Share information with campus newspapers and radio stations so that they can spread the message further. Include campus administrators and other student organizations in your events so that they too are part of the discussions. Reach out to students all over campus, like those in STEM majors and multicultural organizations, so that lots of people can participate. In light of recent events with the global pandemic, absentee and early voting has become more important than ever. Absentee voting refers specifically to ballots cast by voters who are unable or unwilling to go to a voting place. Early voting refers to ballots cast prior to Election Day. Both forms of voting help break down barriers for voters and increase participation. Think about all of the different situations that people might face that could keep them from making it to the polls on Election Day. Students will likely have lots of questions about absentee and early voting, so you will want to know a lot about your state's rules and procedures. Before you start talking to other students about absentee or early voting, make sure you can answer all these questions for your state. When does early voting begin, and where do I go to vote early? Do I need my ID to vote early? What if I have a mail-in or absentee ballot? How do I ensure my ballot is counted after I mail it? Can ballots be forwarded to the person at another address? These are the questions your peers will be asking, so it's important that you are confident in the process and all the latest laws and dates surrounding the early voting process. There are many ways to promote absentee and early voting, from handing out packets of information, to connecting with interested voters over social media or text, to leading group discussions. An early voting event is similar to a get out the vote activity because you're getting someone to vote. So you can use tools that you might use on election day, such as a pledge to vote or a text chain. However, it's also similar to a voter registration event since you're trying to get other students to fill out the proper paperwork to request their absentee ballot. Pick and choose some other tactics that you might use at other types of events to find the right combination for an early voting event. Please ensure that your activities follow any policies and procedures your campus has implemented in light of the pandemic. It's important to be informed about your state laws and deadlines regarding early or absentee voting so that you can talk to students one-on-one. The process for absentee voting varies with each state, so it's important that you are ready to answer any questions that may come up during your voter engagement event and help students request their absentee ballot, fill it out, and return it to the appropriate location. I'd recommend having the Secretary of State's website available during your event so that if a student is having trouble with their absentee ballot, you can easily find a solution to their specific problem on the SOS website. GOTV includes any effort intended to encourage students to vote in elections. It usually takes place in the immediate lead up to the election. GOTV events are very important. Getting students to turn up at the polls brings together all the work that you've done and makes sure that students' voices are heard. Your work begins well before Election Day and involves reaching out to as many people as possible, making sure that they have a way to get to the polls. Also make sure information is available on polling locations and same-day registration if your state offers it, as well as candidate guides. If your state does not have an election this semester, focus your fourth event on an area we've already covered, like voter education or voter registration. Keep in mind, however, that elections happen all the time. Your community may not have a presidential election, but maybe there's an election for a local office or the school board. Being a voter means voting in every election, not just the presidential. Ask your state director for more information about local elections in your area. GOTV events can take many different forms. Before Election Day, have students pledge to vote and create plans with them for how to get to the polls. On Election Day, you might spread awareness about how to get to the polls, create a phone, text, or email bank to contact students individually, organize rides to the polls, or any number of other creative ideas. There are also several online tools that you can use. Your Secretary of State's website is always a great place to start for all voting information. It's also a great place to direct people to register to vote or to request an absentee ballot or find information about voting on Election Day. Another great tool to use is vote.org, which is meant to be a one-stop shop for all your voting-related needs. No matter what state you're in, vote.org will direct you to the proper channels to register to vote, learn about the candidates, request an absentee ballot, and anything else you may need. It's a great tool to recommend to others at events and very easy to use. You might also be interested in starting text or email chains so that friends can encourage each other to make it to the polls directly. Social media such as Snapchat, Instagram, or Twitter can also be a great tool for encouraging peers to get out the vote. Whatever platform you choose, it's important to make use of both online and in-person programs to reach out to as many people as possible. Hosting a successful GOTV event is about motivating students to get out to the polls. Be prepared to talk about same-day voter registration and the necessary forms of voter identification. Start planning and advertising early, building a coalition as you go. Create opportunities to engage directly and work hard to make the voting process as easy as possible for students. Engage with students directly through social media. Include volunteers, advisors, and faculty members in your planning. Work with a coalition to get Election Day observed as a campus holiday. Another important aspect of holding voter engagement events is being able to navigate difficult conversations with your peers about politics. Having an inspiring conversation that influences another to act is why we do this job. However, sometimes you might come across some difficult conversations where you might find yourself lost for words or struggling to maintain nonpartisanship. Not to worry. We will cover a couple of examples and ways to respond in these difficult conversations. Meaningful civic dialogue is both intentional and purposeful, and will likely be a part of all the voting work that you do. It is especially important for voter education events, since you will lead a variety of discussions with students who may have reservations about voting. You should practice having these conversations before holding events so that you are ready and confident on the day of the event. You can also reach out to your state director if you want to practice navigating some of these difficult conversations. The first scenario we'll go through today is talking to someone who doesn't like the candidates. Let's say someone says to you, "I'm not voting this year because neither of the major party candidates match my values." A great example response to this is, "I hear you. Would you be interested in learning more about third-party candidates or candidates in your local election?" This response says two major things. It shows respect and suspends judgment for that person, and it's very purposeful and to the point. The fellow in this scenario has validated how the other person feels and has offered help in guiding the person toward resources available to them. Remember to remain nonpartisan in holding these difficult conversations about candidates. Don't show support for one candidate over another, but do provide resources for any candidates the person might be interested in. Let's take a look at a second scenario. In this conversation, the person doesn't think their vote matters. "It doesn't matter if I vote or not," they say. "One person's vote isn't going to change anything." A great response from our example fellow would be, "It really feels that way sometimes, doesn't it? But actually, one person's vote can decide an election, and students are a key part of that." In this scenario, the fellow followed the same two guidelines, showing respect and being to the point. They once again validated the feelings the person was having and told them that although it feels that way, it isn't necessarily true. You could also include some stories about extremely close elections in this scenario to help prove your point. The Campus Election Engagement Project channel on YouTube has a video with just such stories for you. The last scenario we'll discuss today is a person who thinks the entire system is corrupt and therefore sees no point in voting. Let's say that the person says, "I have no faith in the government, and I don't want to take part in this country's corrupted political system." Our fellow in this example then responds with, "Well, you're not alone in that feeling, but at the end of the day, politicians are public servants, and Americans have the ability to change the system through our vote." Once again, the fellow showed respect by validating the feelings of the person, and was direct and to the point by noting that politicians still have to listen to the American people when they vote. These are just a few examples of some difficult conversations you might come across in your time as a seat fellow. I hope these examples make you feel more prepared, but if you need some additional guidance on navigating difficult conversations, check out our Living Room Conversations training, or talk to your state director about setting up some practice conversations with SEEP staff. Last thing, if you have any questions about anything we went over today, please reach out to your state director or contact our fellowship director, Jessica Holtkamp, jessica@campuselect.org. Thank you all for joining us. Be sure to check out and follow us on social media or join our Slack channel for conversations and idea sharing with our fellows all across the U.S. Once again, welcome to SEEP.